Imagine yourself standing atop a windswept peak, battling howling gusts that exceed 100 miles an hour. Visibility vanishes as a fierce storm rolls in, engulfing you in a world of white. The temperature plunges well below zero as ice begins to accumulate on your clothing. You're not scaling the treacherous heights of Mount Everest, but rather standing on the summit of Mount Washington, a 6,288-foot peak in the White Mountains of New Hampshire that has earned a notorious reputation as having the world's worst weather. Today, we're going to find out what it's like to live and work on the summit of Mount Washington.
You feel like you're on a lunar surface up there. It's the strangest feeling. You feel like you're on a different planet.
For centuries, this unassuming mountain has been a meteorological laboratory where the collision of moist air from the Atlantic, Arctic cold fronts from Canada, and warm Gulf winds from the south create a mixing bowl of extreme conditions found nowhere else on Earth at this elevation.
There are some weeks where we would be in the fog for 8 days at a time. In the whole shift, you'd be stuck in the fog.
Scientists at the Summit Observatory have documented temperatures plummeting to a bone-chilling negative 47 degrees Fahrenheit. They've measured snowfall in every month of the year and witnessed mercury swings of 50 degrees in a matter of hours.
When you're walking into the wind and you have 100, 120 mile per hour wind coming at you, it's hard to breathe.
But Mount Washington is more than just a place of record-breaking storms. The data and research conducted atop this peak have shaped our modern understanding of wind patterns, ice formation, and global climate trends. The knowledge gained here aids meteorologists in predicting dangerous weather. It influences aircraft design and even helps engineers build skyscrapers that can withstand the most powerful gusts. Join us as we go off the radar with former Mount Washington weather observer Charlie Lopresti to explore the spot where future meteorologists are inspired, where weather records are shattered, and where nature continues to teach us about the raw power of our atmosphere.
You know, when the clouds are below the summit and you see just these islands of peaks kind of poking out above the clouds, it's almost unworldly.
I'm meteorologist Emily Gracie, and you're listening to Off the Radar, a production of the National Weather Desk. On the show, we dig deep into topics about weather, climate, the ocean, space, and much more. Our goal is to help you better understand the weather and to love it as much as we do.
There's more to imagine when you listen, so let your imagination soar with Audible. Audible has audio titles from every genre that will inspire you to imagine new worlds, possibilities, and ways of thinking. As an Audible member, you get to choose one title a month to keep from their entire catalog. Enjoy an exciting reawakening of a beloved classic with the Audible original David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, produced by Academy Award-winning director Sam Mendes, starring Ncuti Gatwa, Helena Bonham Carter, and Theo James. This adaptation breathes new life into a familiar tale. New members can try Audible free for 30 days. Visit audible.com/imagine or text IMAGINE to 500-500. That's audible.com/imagine or text IMAGINE to 500-500.
Well, Charlie Lopresti, thanks so much for coming on the show today. You have a really interesting past, and you are our chief meteorologist at our station in Portland, Maine, and really excited to talk to you about one particular past job you had as a Mount Washington observer. That's fun. I mean, that must be one of those where people think it's cool that you're a meteorologist on TV, but then they find out you actually did that too, and that's just icing on the cake, huh?
Yeah, well, I guess it gives you a little street credit. Yeah, no, it's a great place to live and work if you're a young weather enthusiast, if you love adventure. It's a great spot to live and work when you're in your 20s as well. But my wife said, hey, Charlie, I need you home for dinner. And so, after a couple of years living and working on top of the mountain, I'm down in the valley now working at CBS 13, Fox 23 in Portland, Maine. The funny thing is, Emily, is I'm still not home for dinner because I work the evening shift.
Yeah, I was going to say, the hours are a little better, but they're not amazing.
Yeah.
It's still rough.
It was a fun job up there, and it's something I'll always remember. And I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about it today.
Cool. All right. Well, let's go back to the beginning. Tell me when you decided to be a meteorologist and kind of growing up in New England and how that progressed.
Yeah, well, I grew up in southeastern Massachusetts. I used to live and work on a farm, which I love to garden these days as well. And just remembering thunderstorms coming across the fields. I remember Hurricane Gloria, Hurricane Bob, and also big nor'easters. So I knew from an early age that I had a love for storms, particularly snowstorms. And I've always had a curiosity for it. So when I had the opportunity to go to school and study meteorology, I jumped at that. I went to Plymouth State in New Hampshire and got a great education on forecasting there. And that sort of led me to working at the Mount Washington Observatory because they offered an internship program through Plymouth State. I got a chance to do a winter up on Mount Washington, the winter of 1999. And I was hired on as a full-time staff meteorologist in May of 2000. And I was up there for a little over 2 years, living and working with a couple other meteorologists, some volunteers, great researchers, folks from New Hampshire State Park, folks from the Appalachian Mountain Club, the Cog Railway, the Auto Road. There's a lot happening on the summit of Mount Washington.
There is, and I think it's come to the forefront a lot more in recent years too because of technology and because of these live cameras and maybe social media as well, watching all the observers out there like braving the elements, trying to get readings. But for people who maybe live on the West Coast, can you give us a little brief understanding of exactly where and what Mount Washington is?
Sure. Yeah, Mount Washington is located about 60 miles from the coast. It's we live in southern Maine, but we're still relatively close to the presidential range of Mount Washington. Mount Washington is most famously known for the strongest wind recorded by man on April 12th, 1934. It was 231 miles per hour. The old observatory was located in the southeastern corner of the mountain, and they record a southeast wind. And I think it's really interesting. They record a 5-minute average of 188 miles per hour between 12:25 and 12:30 on April 12th, 1934. A 5-minute average, wind speed average of 188 miles per hour. And they had a maximum of 121 in the afternoon of 231 miles per hour. And in the logbook, they're stated by going out and de-icing. They stated they did go out and de-ice prior to that. And I can't imagine what that felt like. The pressure changes, even opening the door, the force on your body, just trying to, whack a metal chain or a metal instrument just to get the ice off. But yeah, there's some hardy folks up there. Observations have been taken up there starting in 1971, the winter of 1970-71. The Army Corps of Engineers started. The Army Signal Service started observations up there in the late 1800s. And the observatory was founded in 1932. So the world record wind happened 2 years after it was founded. Now, when I said it was interesting, the old observatory was on the southeastern corner of the mountain, and the mountain recorded southeast winds very accurately. If you can picture, the mountain's a rounded mountain, Emily. So it's not a peak like you see like in the Rocky Mountains. And it's the rounded feature that actually gives it some of the stronger winds due to the Venturi effect or the Bernoulli effect. And now the current observatory is located on the northwest corner of the mountain, more of where the prevailing winds are. So there's some speculation that we may be missing some of the strongest winds these days when the observatory did move from the southeast corner to the northwest corner. So the world record wind was a southeast wind. And there's some speculation now that southeast wind might be kind of scooting right up and over the current anemometer located in the northwestern corner. And that was moved in 1981.
All right, so we have a little background here on Mount Washington, its shape and where it is. It has this reputation as the worst weather in the world too, which is really interesting. Can you tell me about what your position was like? Because Mount Washington observers are doing several different things, right? You're not just walking outside into the elements and taking readings. What else are you doing when you're up there?
Yeah, great question. A lot of folks think that the observers work for the National Weather Service. There's a contract that the Mount Washington Observatory has with the National Weather Service. They've had it for a very long time. And as staff meteorologists and all the meteorologists and observers that work up there, the primary responsibility is to keep 24-hour a day weather observations for the Weather Service. Now, you might be asking, why can't we put an automated ASOS station up there like we do at all the airports? The problem we have up there is everything is it's just too cold and there's too much rime ice. So all the instrumentation will ice up. We have yet to find an instrument that will not ice up there. Even the current pitot tube anemometer or pitot-static anemometer is heated to 400 degrees. And even that sometimes can ice up. So 24 hours a day, every hour on the hour, the observers go out and whack ice in the wintertime off some of the instruments, including the wind vane. They record the observation, encode it in METAR, and send it off to the Weather Service. And that's what we read as meteorologists. For everyone else gets a chance to read as well. It gets coded, decoded. Other responsibilities, really, it varies from important research projects. There are important air quality projects going on up there. There was some of the first LIDAR was tested up there. In the 1960s, the first jet engines were tested up there for icing. So there's a long history of important research that goes on with icing up there. So as staff meteorologist, I was usually responsible for coordinating a lot of that. There was always a volunteer. And if folks are listening to this and they say, hey, I want to go to the summit of Mount Washington, you could volunteer to go up. And usually the primary responsibility is to cook for the crew, and sometimes edu trips as well. There are educational trips that people can sign up for. Cooking is a big part of it. What else is going on up there? Maintenance. But yeah, there's a lot happening up there. And it's usually about a 12-hour shift that I used to work. Now I think there are about 8-hour shifts. There might be 3 observers on staff, but I used to work a 4 a.m. shift to a 4 p.m. shift. And sometimes if I did the night shift, I'd work a 4 p.m. shift to 4 a.m. shift. That was always a tough one. But
yeah, I was going to say, how do you get up Mount Washington at 4 a.m. in the middle of the winter?
Yeah. So one thing I left out is you actually live and work on the summit in the Sherman Adams building in the observatory, which is located on the northwest corner of Mount Washington State Park's Sherman Adams building. So there are bunks. There's a living room, there's a bathroom, there's a kitchen, and then there's the weather office. I always said I wanted an office with a view, so that's the main reason for working up there. But I could see for about 120 miles out my window. It was great.
Wow.
But yeah, no. So yeah, you live and work up there, and we would work 8-day shifts. We go up on a Wednesday, and we come down the following Wednesday. And then you'd have 6 days off. So it was kind of a cool job in that aspect as well. But when you go up on a Wednesday in the wintertime, you take a snow machine up. They're similar to a snowcat you'd see grooming at some of the ski mountains. The difference, Emily, they have a cab on the back of it that would fit about 12 people. So folks could, get a ride up. And sometimes we'd walk down. Sometimes if you miss your ride, you'd have to hike up. In the summertime, you take a van up. There's an auto road that goes to the summit. And we would have the observatory's van just drive right up and drive down. So you'd still work 8-day shifts even in the summer. So it was an interesting job in that aspect where you were away a lot.
How long of a hike is that? When you say miss your ride, I'm wondering what's the motivation here?
I've only missed it twice. But yeah, so the auto road is about 8 miles long, but there are multiple hiking trails on the mountain. And a lot of your listeners here are probably saying, okay, I've been up there a bunch of times. A lot of folks here of Tuckerman Ravine. It's a great place to ski in the wintertime, the springtime especially. But yeah, there's Tuckerman Ravine Trail, Lion's Head Trail, Huntington Trail. There's on the west side, there's Amanusic Ravine, Jewel Trail. So you can hike up. A lot of these are about 5 miles. And it's a good day. It depends how fast you hike. The auto road's about 8 miles. I've only walked the auto road a couple times, but usually hiking up a designated hiking trail is a lot more enjoyable, I think, than walking up the auto road, which isn't even allowed anyway, just because this car is on it in the summertime. And the wintertime, they have snow coaches that go up there as well.
I'm curious about the lifestyle and if it ever gets depressing or lonely or what's it like when you're up there? Do you ever feel stranded?
Yeah, all of the above. There are some days that are awesome because, you finish your shift at 4:00. It might be springtime. And you grab your skis and you get to go skiing. There's not a lot of above tree line skiing in the Northeast, but there's a great little snowfield on the cone on the east side called the East Snowfields. I used to go skiing there whenever the snow was good and the weather was good. Then you just have to hike back up. There's no lift service, of course. And then there's Tuckerman Ravine, which is a lot steeper. It's down below the eastern snowfields. Hiking, we do a lot of night hiking sometimes after our shift. So that was always fun, just to kind of get out and do different things. You get a chance to see the Aurora Borealis a lot. That's always fun. You get a chance to stargaze and things like that you normally wouldn't, outside of areas that have a lot of light pollution. There are some weeks where we would be in the fog for 8 days at a time. In the whole shift, you'd be stuck in the fog. The odds of you actually seeing anything from the summit are against you. The summit's usually in the fog 60% of the time. So there's a very good chance you're not going to see anything from the summit of Mount Washington. Sometimes de-icing can get a little bit repetitive. And so there can be some depressing weeks. But when you're young in your 20s, which I was at the time, I was always up for whatever adventure there was up there. And I generally enjoyed it. And wouldn't change anything about it. It's a great place to live and work.
Those pictures are always wild to me of the fog below the observatory. And it's crazy. It doesn't even it looks like out of this world,
Yes, you're referring to the undercast, right?
Yes.
Where the clouds below. That's my favorite, Emily. Absolutely. When the clouds are below the summit and you see just these islands of peaks kind of poking out above the clouds. That's my favorite as well. It's almost unworldly. So Mount Washington in the Northeast tree line is about 5,000 feet. So just kind of getting a lay of the land, there's nothing that grows up there. There's a little bit of grass tundra here and there, but it's just piles of rocks everywhere. You feel like you're on a lunar surface up there. It's the strangest feeling. You feel like you're on a different planet. So yeah, when the clouds are below you and you're just on this rock pile and it's just, and then you get a chance to go down the valley and smell grass again and flowers. It's a very unique experience for the senses and you can be transported to almost a different world by taking that, 4 or 5 hour hike up to the summit or drive up. In the summertime, folks can drive up. You can take the stagecoaches up. There's actually a railroad up there, Emily. It's called the Cog Railway. If you've never seen that, that's something to see as well. So there's different means of transportation to get to the summit. In the wintertime, all of that is shut down.
Yeah. What's the season? I'm guessing the winter's a little longer than some folks might think.
Yeah, I lived and worked up there for almost 3 years, and I've seen snow in every month of the year, including June, July, August. It happens every now and then. Yep. The snow usually doesn't start sticking until October and December, and that will take us right through May. In fact, I was just telling Emily Santom, who I work with at CBS 13, we were just talking yesterday about I skied on September 12th. In 2001. It's pretty rare to ski in September, but there was a snowstorm that day, and it wasn't much, but it was enough that we said, okay, let's go skiing. And I skied with a friend of mine in the Mount Washington State Park. And this is back before, the internet was there, but it wasn't huge, and nobody had cell phones or anything. So I said, you know what, Bill? I think we're the first people in New England to ski this season. It was September 12th. And then we saw in the news that night that 2 guys had skied at Killington like a few hours earlier. So I think we were technically the second group of skiers in 2001.
So that's interesting that you bring up that date, because I was going to ask you, clearly that means you were on Mount Washington on September 11th. What was that like? Did anything shut down, or did life continue as usual up there?
Yeah, well, I don't remember the mountain getting shut down, but I remember specifically the weather that day. You remember what it looked like from the video from New York, right? A cold front had just gone through the day before, and it was that cool, refreshing, beautiful air mass that came in, and we're waking up that morning feeling great. You could see probably about 130 miles. And then you got the news. So I'm not sure if the mountain shut down, but I do remember the weather that morning. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was a gorgeous day. So yeah, that was a very somber part of my experience up there.
Interesting. Okay. Can you tell me about the cat? I want to hear, is it Nimbus? Is that his name? Her name? Yeah,
there's been a long history of cats on the summit. First one I can think of is Inga. There's a famous picture of Inga back in the 80s that she has rime ice all over her fur. I don't know if you've seen that picture. To this day, it's the best-selling postcard that the Mount Washington Observatory has.
Wow.
I'll send you a picture of it. You'll love it.
Really?
But poor Inga was left it's an enclosed tower, and there was a little bit of rime ice that day, and she probably wasn't happy. She got stuck in there. She probably snuck her way through. But yeah, when I was up there was a cat named Nin. Nin was a white and black cat. Nin kind of ruled the whole observatory. Periodically, she'd go outside, and it would be funny to see the tourists. One tourist actually thought she was a goat. I thought that was funny. We put it in the logbook at the time.
How large was this cat?
Yeah, it's bizarre. You never know what you're going to get from tourists. But yeah, Nin was our cat, and that was one of my responsibilities as shift leader was to feed the cat every day. And Nimbus, that's I'm not even sure. Nimbus must be the newest cat. There was Marty, that was the cat that had recently passed, I believe. But yeah, there's always a cat up there.
I didn't know if they were all Nimbus, and it was just like, this is Nimbus 15.
No. It's turning into a thing now. There's a great shelter in the valley, the Conway Area Humane Society, and I think they've picked up some cats from them over the years. We actually got our first dog years ago. We got from the Conway Area Humane Society. Great organization there. But yeah, no, it's there's always cats up there, and there are mice. That's the real reason there are cats up there, but it's also everybody likes having a pet.
Yeah, I was going to say, it probably helps, just like almost like a therapy pet for those who don't have family around.
Yeah.
What's the craziest thing or some of the craziest things if you've ever seen while working up there or experienced?
Well, weather-wise, that's an easy one for me. And it's a simple cold front. That's all it was. It was in 2002. It was February 10th. We had a high temperature of 37 degrees, which is very warm. It was a daily record high. And a cold front came through, and the temperature dropped 61 degrees. It got down to 24 degrees below zero in 24 hours. So, and the wind jumped up to 145 miles per hour, too. So that was the strongest wind I had the opportunity to record. And I was on the tower when the wind gusted to 135. So the strongest wind I ever took in the face was 135, but the strongest wind I recorded was 145. And it was on that day. It was February 11th, I believe, 2001 or 2002, one of those. But yeah, that was an exciting day because I've never seen the temperature get that cold that quickly. But, you're 6,000 feet up, 6,288 feet up, and you're going to see rapid temperature changes and tight pressure gradients. That day we had a low tropopause with so much cold coming in. So you get a funneling effect. There's the top of our atmosphere where very little of our weather penetrates, for folks that don't really understand how the wind works up there. So you have a large volume of air that flows into a much smaller volume of air. It's a lot like sticking your thumb over the garden hose. And the mountain is your thumb. So you have accelerated wind coming right up over the summit. And it helps that the summit is rounded too. So just like your thumb. So that day in particular, we had some pretty strong winds. The observatory averages hurricane force winds a third of the time, but once every 3 days, you can expect the hurricane force winds. But that day was my favorite day. We got a chance to go outside and play in the wind. One of the responsibilities was to get the precipitation can, which is located about 50 feet, 75 feet from the safe haven of the doorway. And I remember the wind was about 129 miles per hour. And you have to carry this ridiculous precipitation can just to measure, a couple inches of snow. So we do that every 6 hours. A fun thing to do was there's a club called the Century Club. And I don't know if you've heard of this, Emily, but when the wind is sustained or gusting of 100 miles per hour or greater, if you can walk around the entire perimeter of the observation deck without falling or touching the railing, you get entered into this elite club called the Century Club, and it's terrifying.
I can't decide if that's like badass or nerdy or both.
It's definitely nerdy. And if you're in it, it's pretty badass. But I'm not in it. I think there's only 12 people that ever. I've tried it a couple times, but one thing that's hard that people don't might not necessarily think about when you have wind that strong in the wintertime is when you're walking into the wind and you have 120 mile per hour wind coming at you, it's hard to breathe. So, and you're covered, your whole face is covered with goggles, face mask. So you almost get that feeling of suffocating, and it's almost terrifying. I don't like it. So you almost have to turn, breathe, and then take a step, and then turn, breathe, and take a step. So there's some people that are good at it. I was not one of those, but yeah, when it's that cold and that windy, there are some fun things you can do, but the Century Club always seemed to elude me. I could never make it.
Like, did you ever get hurt? Are there injuries ever during this process?
I never got hurt, and I don't know anyone that got hurt either. It's generally a safe place to be. The building, there's more concrete in the Sherman Adams building where the observatory lives than the Washington Monument. The walls are about 2 to 3 feet thick in most cases, and the windows are bulletproof. So the windows have been tested to take a hailstone at 200 miles per hour in just in case it needs to. But yeah, if you're in wind that strong, it's not like you're in a hurricane where there's projectiles coming at you, trees and things like that. You're on this barren landscape. There's nothing that's going to hit you unless there's ice falling off the tower, which does happen in the springtime. So usually if you get into any trouble, like if you fall over, if the wind blows you over, if you lay down flat, it's usually you can kind of crawl your way back to wherever you need to go. But, I think most people are pretty smart that live and work up there. Nobody's going to go for a long hike in hurricane force winds. Where things get a little hairy is when other folks get into trouble up there. One of the problems you have with Mount Washington in the presidential range, really any mountain in Maine and New Hampshire, is we're very accessible to some of the big cities like Boston, New York, Philadelphia. In a couple hours drive, you can go for a hike and go for ski as well. So that's one of the problems that we run into. That unfortunately, there have been a lot of deaths on the mountain. But yeah, I think if a lot of folks, somebody takes a day off from work and they say, I'm going to go for a hike, I'm going to go skiing no matter what. And then maybe the avalanche danger is considerable, or the wind is going to be strong and the temperature is going to be cold. It's hard to tell that person, no, today's not the best day. Come back and do it another day. So it's important, I think, to be knowledgeable about the weather, which can change very quickly. As you mentioned earlier, it is the home of the world's worst weather. In the wintertime, there are avalanches that happen regularly, and there have been problems with that over the years. And they're happening more frequently now, especially in the wintertime for skiers, I've noticed, because equipment is getting better. There's more accessibility to get up into dangerous areas. So that's something that needs to be addressed, I think, in the coming years. I think it's just educating the public on when it's safe.
Interesting.
Yep.
So it sounds like when you described the building, bulletproof and all of the things that go on and employing the staff. Can you tell me why it's still important to have people up there doing this? Why it's important to monitor the weather on Mount Washington? How the rest of the country can benefit from this?
Yeah, I think it's important to have that data set of observations that are continuous that go back to the early 1930s, 1932 to be exact. And in this day and age, I think climate studies are important. And when you have that Arctic outpost that's perched 6,288 feet above sea level, you're going to get an important data set that you normally would not have down at sea level. So you might be able to see trends in climate that are greater or less based on that data set. And I think that's probably one of the more important pieces. But there's a lot going on up there in addition to the observations. There's a lot of important research, as we discussed earlier, and education is a big part too. The observatory has taken a stance on education. They have these edu trips that you can sign up and and spend a night or two on the summit. And there'll be a theme to each one. One might be mountain meteorology. Another one might be photography. So that's always fun as well. And they're a private nonprofit organization and they're member supported. So that's always a big part as well. I don't see the summit staff leaving anytime soon.
So tell me about your transition to TV. How did you go from doing this outdoorsy thing to now you're putting on makeup and there's a green screen and light?
We have to tell anybody about the makeup.
I mean, I'm sure you're perfect just the way you are, but we all are.
So the TV thing is bizarre. No, it's great. The TV has treated me really well. I just knew that living on a mountain is not going to work forever. So originally I wanted to get into research, meteorology, and we were doing a lot of great icing research up there. I loved it. The problem was I didn't have a PhD, so I was never the one doing the research. I was actually the one just kind of doing the grunt work behind the scenes. So I quickly realized that wasn't for me. And I love forecasting, especially knowing the weather. Snowstorms, a nor'easter, there's nothing more exciting than that. So I said, okay, let's try the TV thing. So luckily, I don't know how I got hired. I was so bad. I got hired in Bangor at the ABC station, Bangor.
Pretty small market, right?
Yeah, it's really small. I don't think many people watch, which is good. And then just, you know what it's like. You get comfortable with it. And so I got a job in Providence after that. It was great. Providence is a great place to live and work for a while. And then my wife and I found ourselves hiking and skiing every weekend, New Hampshire and Maine. So I said, okay, let's move back. And it was one of those things where we just made a lifestyle decision. We took a lateral move, and luckily there was a position open at Channel 13, and I've been there for about 20 years now.
Wow.
Yeah. And one of the reasons we chose to live here is I'm about an hour drive from Mount Washington. So we can get to the coast of Maine, in about 15 minutes. We're pretty close to the coastline, but I can make it to ski resorts or backcountry skiing or wherever in the wintertime in about an hour. I'll drop this every week, usually once a week. I usually drop my kids off at school. So I'll take the hour ride up to Pinkham Notch, which is on the east side of Mount Washington. And I'll take my dog and we'll skin up to Tuckerman Ravine and we'll ski down. There's a lot of nice ski trails up there. The John Sherburne Trail, which is a nice little, almost like cruising blue trail. You can ski down. We do that at least once a week when the snow's good.
Hold up. Your dog skis?
All right. I should have been more specific. He runs. I ski. But
okay.
Yeah, my dog comes with me while we ski. But the reason we just chose to live here is one of the reasons is we're so close to the mountains, which also provides a huge forecast headache, Emily. If you can imagine, my forecast area is southern and central Maine, all the western mountains of Maine, and all the White Mountains in New Hampshire. So our forecast area goes into New Hampshire. We're forecasting coastal Maine, which this time of year, the water temperature is in the low 60s. In the springtime, it can be in the mid 50s. And then you have 6,000 foot mountains, 60 miles away. And in between there, we have a beautiful lakes region. And so you have these different microclimates, but we love it. And it's a cool place.
Charlie, is there anything else you want to share about your life there in Maine or your time on Mount Washington?
For folks who haven't checked out the Mount Washington Observatory, check them out. It's mountwashington.org is their website. They're member supported. They're a private nonprofit. They're always looking for folks to get involved and volunteer as well. So yeah, great organization. Thanks for having me. This has been really cool to chat with you today. I always like chatting about Mount Washington.
Cool. Thanks, Charlie. Off the Radar is a production of the National Weather Desk. Make sure you're following the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes publish every Tuesday. If you like today's show, please share it with a friend. Also, make sure you check out some of our past episodes. Big thanks to Charlie Lopresti for joining me today. Also, thanks to the Mount Washington Observatory for all that they do. Shout out to my associate producer, Brian Petritz, for his help on this episode. For the National Weather Desk, I'm meteorologist Emily Gracie. Make it a great day.